Welcome to the Finding Mastery podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michael Gervais, and this one's different. We're in the Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, along with X Games champion and Olympian Turski, famed climber Tommy Caldwell, and UFC champion Vitor Belfort.
I think martial arts, everybody should do. I call martial scientists, the way you discover yourself, because the weakness is strength.
You can experience these really hard things and then turn them to have them fuel you towards bettering yourself.
And then all of a sudden, inevitably, I caught an edge and bam, within seconds, I started coughing blood. I had basically hit so hard, I sliced my pancreas right in half over my spine. And doctors told me, you might be able to ski, but you're probably not gonna compete. But I had this nugget inside of me that was like, if there's any chance, I'm gonna make it.
I find strength to fight, become a champion, but I went through a big depression after.
You went through something that was what most people would consider traumatizing, and you're not. So wait, hold on. How'd you do it?
Well, I think what helped me is the way Kyrgyzstan ended. It was different for me than the other people on the expedition because I was the person in the end who made the hard decision. Like, I decided to kill someone. One of the hardest things can happen in your life. Like, would you have the power to do that?
There's no such thing as a big moment. There's only this moment. And if I can practice being all of me, bringing myself forward in this moment, over time, I'm practicing being all of me a lot. This is a conversation you will want to take the time to listen to.
The views expressed herein are solely those of the persons expressing them and do not represent the views of the United States, Department of Defense, or Department of the Navy.
Mike, do you want to stay?
So how did you guys get into what you're doing?
So I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And I born in a broken family, so I was very hyped. So they discovered that I think I consider a genius, but in the sense of like, the kid that can be put to sleep. He can do things, so they found the sports as a way of like, can he put his energy there? So
he can't sleep. You were restless.
Yeah, like I was like all over the place and very active. And I think back in the days that I think this deficit attention, just like people make up when you're a special kid, they make up rules like they want to put in maths. And I remember they put in maths, but I was very active. I was just active, and sport was my thing. So I grew up in a very rough area, so I was bullied. I was a stutter kid, like I stutter. So I remember my teacher said, read a essay, and I was reading and said, you stutter? I said, yes, I am. So my first bully was my teacher from school. So, and it was funny because back in the days, they don't have the word bullying. Now it's bullying. So I think sport driven, but I mean, martial arts just was a place where I can express myself and feel like take ownership of the insecurity that was designed and creating me. I think every kid is like a little bit more like you need the reinforce of a teacher, your parents. And I think martial arts gave me that you're capable of doing.
So the martial arts, in the beginning, was it about like protecting yourself from things like bullies, or was it sounds like it's a little bit of both. You had the protecting yourself and then you had the like finding something that made you feel full.
Yeah, I think martial arts, everybody should do. I call martial scientists. It's the way you discover yourself, because the weakness is strength. And I mean, we all in a martial art, we always fighting something. You know, you're fighting your disease, you're sick, you're fighting so you're always fighting something, or you want to achieve something. You're either in offense or defense in life. In every area. So, but in martial arts teach you to be relaxed, teach you to kind of, okay, someone's choking you, you say, okay, then let me take my time, don't tap, you can fight. So martial arts, in every martial arts teach you a different principle. Since jiu-jitsu teach you, you're in a very bad situation, use your leverage, using his strength against himself. So, and then you have the striking, you overpower someone, and then you have the wrestling. Like in wrestling, you can never run back. You can never go back. Jiu-jitsu, you can stay in your defense mode and let the other guy. So every martial arts has your strength and your weakness. So then you discover this in yourself. I started working on what I'm good at, not what I'm not good at. So I think that's called I don't know how they call it psychologists, but working in your strength, not in your weakness. So I think that's kind of it.
Cool. So I'm Kaya, and I'm from Montreal, Canada. Grew up there in the cold. So started off on skis really early on in my life, but quickly transferred over and spent my time in the skate park. Aggressive inline rollerblading. So it's a really niche sport. Pretty uncool, I know. But I loved it. I really thrived in the skate park. And when I was 17, I hadn't skated in about 10 years. Tried it once and just fell in love. Everything transitioned really well. I learned my balance, my air awareness, my understanding of transitions, and I just thrived on the mountain. And I love the speed, I love the air, I love the intensity that freestyle sports brings to my life, and the challenge. And what I love about my sport of slopestyle skiing is it's a judge sport. So difficulty, amplitude, execution, creativity, style. And I was obviously always a wild child, loved pushing, just exploring those edges, pushing my limits, seeing how far I could take myself. And I was also a really creative kid, always in the art room, trying different crafts. And so slopestyle skiing was my perfect outlet. I loved it. I was on tour for about 12 years, X Games, World Champs, Olympics for Team Canada.
You started competing at what age?
So I competed in rollerblading first, internationally. I became pro rollerblader when I was 14. Then I switched over to skiing at 16, and it took me about 6 months to sign my first pro contract. So really, yeah.
You've never been on skis before that?
I had been when I was a kid, but not in the park or anything, just really cruising. So when I made that switch at 16, I knew there was something there. And I was still in high school, convinced my parents, like, hey, I want to move out west to Whistler. Let me give it a year. And my dad was a professor, and he's like, I don't know. School was very important to him. And I said, let me try this. I have a deep feeling that I can do this. I can be really fucking good at this. And so I moved out to Whistler, actually Squamish, so about an hour away. Took the Greyhound bus every day by myself, skied by myself. I was self-taught rollerblading and self-taught skiing, never been coached until way later on in my career. So yeah, self-made and love to fly. That's me. I'm that kid. In my sport, we fly up to 80, 90 feet we're going maybe 45, 50 miles an hour forward and backwards.
Upside down.
Upside down, doing like double course, double flips.
Now, how you train that? You go to a gym and kind of...
Yeah, so obviously a lot of physical training, agility training. You have to have really quick feet because the impacts are hard, but you also have to have your muscles turn on instantly, right? A lot of visualization because it's really dangerous. So I need to absolutely not just see the trick, but feel it, really feel the trick. I've never attempted a trick in my life without being convinced that I can land it because I've done it in my head several times.
So you create your own tricks, basically.
Yeah, I create my reality. I create my run in my mind before I do it. And by the time I'm doing it on the hill, it's been done many times. And I know I can do it. I've got it. Yeah.
That's dangerous.
Who taught you that?
Figured it out.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. It was my gift. It was a gift to me.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
It was just a natural byproduct for you, like, okay, I need to feel and see this thing.
I mean, it was my way of keeping myself safe. I wasn't rogue. Of course, I have a different relationship with fear than most. I can kind of entertain those limits, push those limits, but I have this incredible trust in myself because I've thought it through. And if I attempted everything without thinking it through, I'd be dead. I don't know. I'd be crippled. I don't know. It was automatic. I visualized, and it was stuff for the skate park first, and then I'd land the tricks. I was like, okay, let's just keep building.
So like at the skate park or once you got into skis, you didn't have peers that were like teaching you how to visualize at all? Like it wasn't something you talked about?
No, actually, I remember when I started first working with you. You're like, where did you learn that? And I was like,
That's wild.
It struck me then, it struck me now. Like I personally didn't have any coaching in my sport. So it was the culture that would kind of teach you.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't like a coach. And then I translated that once I found something that I really loved, which is the science of excellence.
Mm-hmm.
There was a structure in the university setting, but like I kept just going further and further, trying to figure out a solution that worked for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It sounds like that's kind of similar, yeah.
It's what kept me safe. It's what built trust in me, and I had the building blocks. And again, I couldn't go for it unless I saw it, because I knew that the consequences were just too high. The risks are too high when you're doing a.
That's a real. Like there is no, you cannot stun that. Like someone cannot do for you. Like
No. If I'm going for my switch double core 1080, I need at least 60 feet. I can't do it on a small jump. So I need to know. I need to be sure I can do it. And so I visualized it 1,000 times before I did it, and I landed it second try. Yeah. Anyway.
You didn't practice in foam pits and stuff back. They didn't have that stuff back
So
then.
when I first started, no, because I started back in '98 rollerblading.
No.
And then skiing about 10 years later. Later on in my career, we had access to foam pits, water ramps, trampoline. So when I was a Red Bull athlete, I worked with a Red Bull coach, Matt, who was the best. And so that's where I took some of my like bigger tricks to the next level, let's say.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I try not to fly in my sport most of the time. If I'm flying, things are going wrong.
you hang.
Yeah, little tiny bits of time in the air, okay, but no big ones. But anyways, I'm Tommy Caldwell. I'm a big wall free climber, which is not going to be. I use ropes, just not to be confused there. And I'm best known for a lot of different types of climbing, but probably if you had to put one out in front of them, it's climbing the Dawn Wall on El Capitan. There's a cool movie about it.
Yeah, it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I got started super young. I did have a great mentor in my father. Not really a coach per se, but like a life mentor. Climbing didn't really have coaching at that time, but he showed me how to be in the mountains. And his main gift in life, he still has this today, honestly, is to reframe adversity as adventure, which is this like makes things that are hard seem great. That's what brings you to life. So he would take me on kind of these kind of insanely dangerous to other people climbs when I was really young, but it wasn't dangerous because he was so experienced. But we'd get in these kind of hairy situations and I could see his eyes light up. And I didn't understand how much of a gift that was at that age, but it served me so well. So as I got older and got more and more into climbing, I started to kind of crave the adventure. Like I would seek it out. And so I started climbing big walls and I thrived there. And then I had this experience where I went to Kyrgyzstan, my first big international expedition, and I got kidnapped by an Islamic group of militants and held hostage for 6 days.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They point gun to you guys?
Yeah, it was gnarly.
And you hang, you cannot do this. So
You were
Yeah.
climbing.
You're like
at-
climbing?
you were climbing? Mid-climb?
Yeah, we were 1,000 feet up a wall and sleeping in our portaledges, and they came to the base.
You're not hanging.
No, we
Because
were.
you cannot put your
sleeping.
hands up when you're hanging.
We were sleeping. Yeah, they shot up at us to signal that we had to come down, and we came down, and they raided our base camp, and we escaped in the end by me pushing our captor off a cliff and us running for it. So it's like just an insane story. But this was this experience that was so kind of traumatizing. I was 21 years old, and there was 4 climbers, and I feel like the 4 of us didn't all respond in the same way, but I came out of it with this kind of like this, like I was traumatized for sure in a lot of ways, but after a year or so, I was able to like really feel like I need to live every day to its fullest. Like life is tangible, right? Like it could be gone any minute. And then I also had this side of me that it was like, I went through such a hard thing, and because of the tools my dad had given me, I like turned that into strength. And so I really got my feet back underneath me. I was starting to pretty quickly, and then I chopped off my finger with a table saw, which is terrible for a rock climber. and then
I mean, just kind of slide a couple in there.
yeah. And I had a similar thing that you were telling me about earlier, where my doctor came and he's like, "You're not going to be able to professionally climb anymore. Your fingers are so important." And my girlfriend at the time, when the doctor left, she was like, "Fuck that guy, has no idea what you're capable of." And I harnessed that, and those two experiences together created this like incredible growth in my life. I just had so much like fire and zest that I was able to come out of all of that and use it.
So you use what your dad taught you.
Yeah, the adversity that I had. Yeah, the adversity I had, I was like, I can harness this.
My whole career been dealing with fear. Comes a lot of creepy doubts, and I understand that fear has doubts. Fear is good, doubts are bad. So kind of created this thing called I recognize, I rebuke, and refrain. So when I recognize, I have maybe 5 seconds to recognize. Because if I let it go longer, that builds up. And I think negative emotion tends to creep a fighter. So we have so many fights. Muhammad Ali with George Foreman is an example. You can never let a person get into your head. So that's kind of like the trash talking thing works. You have to create your own reality. So the way I prime my mind is just going through my process and remind me who I am. That's my identity as an athlete. So that's helped me a lot, just to be able to silence everything, but especially the inner voice that comes and trying to, it's like almost like a wood. You know that bird, how do you say wood?
The woodpecker. How did you learn, or when did you learn to do that? How did that come to you? To stop that negativity and catch it?
The first fight, I was so afraid I signed a contract with God. It was a way of kind of saying God. And so I was I wasn't afraid to write it. Give me that thing. I was very selfish, but it was a way of expressing with a napkin in the way in. And then I signed a contract. I have to do it. I just have to fulfill it.
A contract with yourself?
Yeah, like with a napkin, and I signed. I said, God, if you give me that fight, I would do this and this and that. And I signed. So now I have to go and do it. Cool. It's almost like wasn't very naive, but I was very selfish. I asked, give me the victory. If you give me the victory, I will do this for you. But since I signed it, I have to go and accomplish. Now going back was selfish, but it was the only way I knew it.
You still have the napkin? Did you keep that?
No, I wish.
The way I prep for competition or for bringing my best, trying a new trick, again, it's usually really high risk out there for me. So I visualize the night before. If it's a competition, I visualize the run twice. That's it. It has to be done perfectly from top to bottom, usually 8 features-ish. So if I mess up midway through, I have to restart.
How long do you?
About a minute is the run.
So 2 is the total. So you'll keep going until you get 2 baked.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly. So land it. I mean, visualization, the feeling, the trick, the crowd, the noise, everything. And then when I'm dropping in, I always had this one song that I would loop during my training that would fuel me. And when I was in the start gate and they were like, "You ready to go?" I had my little iPod shuffle in one ear, and it's like, as soon as I heard it, it was go time, and that was my cue to let everything go.
It's almost like a tennis player, like, when they whip the racket, like Nadal, like.
Yeah, Nadal, doing this.
So you do all that, and you had your stuff.
It was almost like part of a routine.
Yeah.
I had my lucky underwear too, my Joe boxers, but yeah, the music really cued me in, and as soon as I dropped in, nothing else existed. Just trusted all my training, everything I found.
So
It would differ from week, like from
so it was a
competition to
vibe.
competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was hip hop usually. Yeah,
that's cool.
like just hyping me up,
So when I was younger, I really struggled being ready. And that's what led me to the science of it. I had no process, no plan. I was over-rotating and focusing on what they were going to think of me if I didn't do well, whoever the they was. And so I had no ability to be in the present. And then when I first came to understand there are better ways, I was looking for a thing to calm me down, to focus me, to help me build confidence. I was looking for something. And there's lots of good skills that I would do some breathing stuff. I would do imagery and, I would have a pre-performance routine, but that always felt short to me. It never gave me the fullness that I was looking for. And so then what I do now is so my performance now is like giving a public speak. It's like, I'm not doing sport, obviously. Is that I've made a fundamental decision in my life that there's no such thing as a big moment. And that might not be what works for people, but I back into it. There's no such thing as a big moment. There's only this moment. And if I can practice being all of me, bringing myself forward in this moment, then over time, I'm practicing being all of me a lot throughout the day.
When you say there's not a big moment, you don't make nothing bigger than what it is now.
Than what it is right now.
Important now. So
yeah,
and that being present is creating the state of flow. Like you
it does help.
You're
me.
here, and
yeah.
So
I don't have to try to do these things to be okay, and it gives me way more time to practice being me. Present is what we're talking about. Calm, confident, here, focused, adjusting, being in love with the unfolding moment. Like that's what I want, the state I want to be in. But I can't wait for the stage moment. I can't wait for the starting gate at the Olympics. I never had that moment, but I can't wait for those moments. I need to practice as often as I can. So it first hit me like, there's no such thing as a big game. There's this game. Big half, big quarter, big play. There's just this play. So it's more of a position in life than it is, for me, a tactic. Now those tactics work. The science is awesome around them. And I use them sometimes still.
It's like one coach told me to say, Victor, how many rounds you fight? You say just one round. If you win, finish. If you don't, you go, you have one more. And you have one more. So it's like you counting the rounds is a very stressful thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 2 to go. Oh, 2 to go. It's that, I think that anticipation, that's what's killed. Like
that kills the moment, or that kills the opportunity in the moment.
Like where you just say, like
that
you're
agency,
being present. Yeah. Like you're in the corner, just breathe, 3 breaths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I have 2 more. You start overthinking, and you cannot be in the moment. That's such a
one moment at a time.
Yeah.
One step at a time. I had a note on my sleeve that said 1 step at a time. In slopestyle skiing, there's 7, 8 features. Often, if I was scared, if weather was poor, for example, I would be scared. Feature 7, feature 8, I'd be thinking about it, and then I'd be messing up right at the beginning. I'm not. So it was like 1 step at a time. That was my cue. Yeah. 1 moment at a time. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, I find it so, like, you guys are great competitors, right? And it seems like the visualization always worked really well for you. For me, when I tried it just made me kind of too nervous. So I've taken the opposite approach, where I kind of don't do any visualization. I just start going. I just go up there and start climbing. Sure. And I feel like what I do is so much about minimizing the emotional reaction, minimizing the risk, and just executing. And so when I talk to you, it feels like the anti-strategy in a way.
Are you a risk manager or risk taker?
I'm a risk manager for sure. Yeah, like climbing is no. I'm actually really adverse to risk, I would say.
Most people would look at you and not understand that analysis.
Yeah, I mean, climbing is not an adrenaline sport. If adrenaline happens, something's going wrong. And so I'm really trying to be in places that should probably induce some adrenaline and having none.
And how do you do that? Yeah, that's really cool. That's the yin and yang. It's everything come together, right? Same with you, right? And actually all three, right? It's an adrenaline sport. Actually, that's like a name in the industry. And are you trying to be calm? What are you trying to do?
I think for me, it's more like it's not the fear of failure. It's like when you fell, it's almost like you embarrass yourself. You get knocked out. What's the worst? I remember my wife, what the worst that can happen is she told my daughter, the worst that can happen with your dad, you get knocked out. At least someone goes to war, sometimes they don't come alive. Your dad's just gonna get knocked out. My dad, it's funny because to understand.
So you're not afraid of being hurt? That's not the fear.
For me, it's not the first. So this I remember was like, man, I get knocked out, I'm gonna get embarrassed. I'm gonna let people down, you know. So I used to think, and that's not a good way to think, because I think that you don't fight your best fight when you don't fight to win. It's like the lion trying to be something else. He's not gonna be able to hunt. So I felt like you have to know what type of fighter are you. Some guys, they're more like in the endurance type of thing. I'm a lion. And lion hunts in a certain way. You cannot try to be someone that you cannot.
I love that.
And I mean, sometimes I want to prove I can fight 4 rounds. I get off my strength. So you just got to know who you are, what type of animal you are, and just be that guy. And like what you're saying, like your sport, you cannot have adrenaline. Since her sport is full of adrenaline all the time, and you got to control it.
Yeah. So how do you work through sticky spots? So I don't want to over practice. I don't want to do imagery. I want to have, like, the only thing I'm doing that's stressful really is like rich, deep, honest conversations with my wife, you know, because she's a truth teller and she holds up a mirror and I see myself in those conversations. But I'm not sure if that's how you would answer it. Like if you're on a ledge or whatever you would describe it, you're trying to find the next hold.
Yeah,
and
the next hold.
not,
I'm thinking about what's the next one I'm going to grab this year. If I
Yeah.
don't work. So what do you think?
It's hard to answer it in the context that you're thinking. I think in climbing, you're like, how do you grab the next hold? I mean, sometimes you don't, and you fall off, and then the rope catches you, and you get back on. But when I think of sticky situations, I think of like unexpected danger or a storm coming or something. You know, you're in something that just feels heavy. And honestly, the way that I've learned to get through that is generally to use humor. Like, there's nothing that's more, that feels better in the mountains than being in something that should be kind of extreme and bringing lightness to it. Those are the partners that I look for that can do that.
yeah.
Smile.
Yeah, you smile. Yeah, you have joy. Because sometimes, like, you think it should be scary, but it's just in your head.
And if you do
Often
that
that's
too
the case.
much, what's the problem? Like too
Well,
much of anything is a problem, right?
Yeah, like if you actually are close to death and you're laughing, that's not good. But I think so much of the time in what I do, it just seems kind of scary or it seems uncomfortable when it really isn't all that dangerous. And so that's when you can break the
Can you give like an example of it?
Like I did this incredible climb with Alex Honnold in Patagonia a bunch of years ago, where the people had been trying this thing for like decades. They would always talk about like this conversation with death and this big scary mountain that they were trying to climb and all these scary things. And Alex is just such this like no big deal kind of guy, and he just would always make jokes. And we realized that the heaviness that they were bringing to it wasn't necessary. Like we were up there doing the same thing, but just kind of like laughing our way through it. And it turns out that it was really uncomfortable, but it really wasn't all that dangerous. And I think that's the case in my sport a lot of the time.
Yeah, the framing of it goes so far, right? Like what I do is dangerous or what I do is serious.
Yeah, like you have to really get good at discerning what is actually dangerous versus what it just is emotionally feels dangerous, and learning how to control that emotion.
That's good.
Yeah. Huh?
Yeah.
It's like I surf in big waves, you know, like sometimes it can sound scary, but you just start small. You start with the, then they get big. So I asked
It
a guy,
happens quickly.
I asked a guy, say, how do you surf that big? Start small. When I'm in the ski, you know, and the toe in, the wave starts small. It builds up in the middle.
Oh, even when they're surfing a big wave, you're
Yeah,
saying
like-
it's a small little thing, and then before
Yeah.
you know it, it's
It's a monster,
80
but I
feet,
mean,
yeah.
for us, it's a monster right away
Right.
because we were watching. But I mean, and like for us, he's there. Like I'm in the ring, and I don't see it as a big moment, you know, wherever. Like she doesn't see it. She's in the moment. Sometimes you close when I see this thing. I want to close my eyes.
yeah,
So,
right, yeah.
like you literally like you cannot see it. Like if I see you compete, I get more nervous than I'm competing.
It's the thing that we forget is like you were climbing trees maybe at age 4, and we forget all of the climbing at 4 and 5 and 6, and now we see you climbing these radical walls, and you were wrestling as a young kid, or you were rollerblading. Like we lose track of that when we're just watching.
Yeah.
It's important to remember all the time that we put into it.
In my sport, it's high adrenaline like you, but I can't operate on fear. I have to size it up, my feet, But then I have to, as soon as I drop in, if I'm thinking mechanically about what I need to do, it's not going to go well. I got to really sink in and
It's all about your subconscious. Like your conscious you gotta trust the process.
it's trust. It's full trust. It's, yes,
more
there's
skills.
danger. And I recognize that. But knowing what I know and knowing what I've trained, once I've decided I can do it, I'm just going out there to prove to myself, to to land what I already know I've landed.
And that 1 minute sounds like fast for you, or
I don't even know if it's slow or fast. It's no time. It's just in it.
But how about that fundamental commitment? I've seen it. I've already felt it. And I want to prove to myself that I can physically do what I mentally saw.
But it's not an ego thing. It's not, I got to go out there and prove it. It's just, I see the feature. I see the jump. I'm going to switch 1080 on it. I see it already, or I feel it already. Now I'm just going to go do what I already know in my mind.
But what are you trusting? Well, you said it's about like trust. What are you trusting?
My speed sense, my air awareness, my ability to set the trick perfectly.
So that's a trust of my abilities.
Yes.
How much of it is a trust of, like, even if I blow it, that I'll be okay because I'll figure out whatever life happens then? If you were to weight those two, is it more about I'm trusting my abilities to navigate, or it's the bigger trust that, like, no, I know how to figure things out?
I know that if things go wrong in the air, I know how to fall. I know how to catch myself. I'm very aware of every, microseconds, like milliseconds. I'm so in it that when I'm taking off, if before I'm in the air, I know something's gone wrong, and I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna correct it. I trust myself totally.
So it was like a year after Kyrgyzstan, and I was getting my feet back underneath me, and I was at this part in my climbing life. Like, there weren't really professional climbers back then. There wasn't enough money in the sport, but I was like one of the first people that like had the chance of being able to do this full time. And if I had cobbled together enough money to buy this like 400 square foot piece of crap little cabin, and I borrowed some tools from my parents, and it was just fixing it up and remodeling it and not knowing how to use a table saw, and I ended up chopping off my finger with a table saw, which is terrible as a climber, like very, very bad. Like, the type of climbing especially that I was doing is all about finger strength. And it was especially bad because, like, the doctor told me, everybody around me is doing the math. Like, if you're going to be the top of your game and you lose a finger, that's like 10% of your strength gone.
Especially this, they call the three fingers. This finger is one of the most important ones.
Yeah. And so I was in the hospital, and the doctor tried to reattach it. I spent 2 full weeks in the hospital, went through 3 blood transfusions, several surgeries. We tried everything we could. And then
Before you go there, like, when you cut it,
Yeah.
in that moment, like, what was the first thing how did you respond to that moment?
Yeah, I mean, the immediate reaction was like my climbing life.
So that was the
I
first
didn't
thing.
care about how my hand looked. It was like the immediate thing was like climbing. Like, my life is about my hands. And so
Did you think okay, we're gonna fix this, it's gonna get fixed, or was it like, oh,
kind of, yeah. Like I was like, we'll sew it back on. You hear those stories of that working.
yeah.
And so yeah, I had hope in the beginning. So yeah, I have all these experiences in my life where I'm like, I've been through some major stuff, and I feel like I should be more traumatized than I am. But I've never really like gone to therapy. I've never tried it. So I tried it recently. I tried to go to therapy to just like see if we could. I always wonder if I'm gonna get old and like it's gonna all hit me at some point, and I'm gonna like have a mental breakdown or something. Because I just don't feel. I don't feel traumatized the same way everybody like looks at me and thinks I should be, honestly. And then even other people in Kyrgyzstan, they all are like pretty majorly traumatized, and I just haven't had that. So I tried to go, and nothing. I didn't find anything really, honestly. I talked him through the story. It felt slightly emotional, but I was like, I don't know. I think I dealt with it.
I love this because sports psychology, the emergence of sports psychology was to study how the greats do it.
Yeah.
And then decode it. Yeah. So we would study you to say, well, how did you do it? Because you went through something that was what most people would consider traumatizing, a couple of different ones. and you're not. So wait, hold on.
Yeah.
How'd you do it?
Well, I think Kyrgyzstan, maybe what helped me is the way it ended. It was different for me than the other people on the expedition because I was the person in the end who made the hard decision. Like, I decided to kill someone. You know, I think people kind of wonder, like, would they be able to do that? Would they make the decision? And I mean, one of the hardest things you can happen in your life, like, would you have the power to do that? And so even though it was really terrible in a lot of ways, it was empowering in a way because I knew afterwards that, like, when things are really on the line, I now know that I have the ability to react. And so I think that probably healed me.
I would want to know, this is me personally, I don't know how anyone else would respond, but I would want to know that I took action.
Yeah.
Rather than, I'll tell you, like, this is going to sound
Passive.
Yeah, like I remember when I was a little kid and there was a sound in the room and it was a dark room and I'm like 9 years old, something like that. And I remember I got really quiet. I thought there was someone in the room, like an intruder, and I got really still and quiet. And even to this day, I remember, like, when I realized that was my first response, I'm like, that's not going to get me through life. Like, to be tight and small and don't be seen and don't be heard. Like, so I see me in you, like, would I have that ability as an adult now to say, oh yeah, take action? I think you'd probably be able to do it.
No, it's true. Like, and I think you got to know when. And I think that's what you succeed. You pick the right time.
Yeah.
So because if you were to do early, it wouldn't work. So it's reacting on the right time. It's like
How about it?
when you were sharing with me before the story, I say you're waiting for the right moment.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes a hero is just not, hero is not the moment. You just create, you're waiting for the moment. Basically, you create that moment of the situation.
That is kind of what I think we're talking about, is like the readiness to be in the moment, whatever the moment calls for. Do you see it that way, or is that me layering on something to it?
You mean in that experience?
Yeah.
The readiness to be in the moment?
Like all of your life experiences, that you were ready for that moment.
Probably in retrospect, but I didn't conceptualize that in the moment.
No,
that's
of
for
course,
sure.
yeah, of course.
But in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, the things my dad brought to my life, the way that I was trained, the physical abilities we had to endure for 6 days, like all these things added to the eventual successful outcome, I suppose. And so I feel really lucky to have had that life experience of the past before that.
The past before that. Yeah. What do you hope people take away from that part of your life experience?
I think what I started with, the idea that you can experience these really hard things and then turn them to have them fuel you towards bettering yourself.
I like what you said about the, adversity.
Turning adversity into adventure. Yeah.
I can see that on your story.
And Dad actually said that? Or did you create?
No, that's a narrative that I kind of developed. Like that's what he did without having words to put to it.
Yeah, adversity to adventure.
Yeah.
And
I mean, he was an adventurer by heart, and he loved.
And he lit up the moments of adversity.
Yeah, like when I was a little kid, I remember climbing a big mountain with him and in an intense thunderstorm and running down as lightning crashed all around us, and then we got into these trees, and you could just see this excitement. He's like, this is what life is all about. Like, not only is this going to prepare you, it's also a great story to tell to our friends, and he just like loved that kind of stuff. As long as we weren't actually.
You know what I love about you? You tell a story and you laugh, you smile.
Yeah, right.
Like, you're the type of guy, like, you want to be on your team when things go out the fence.
Right,
He's like, you smile. Like,
Yeah.
you make that moment be more relaxed.
What were your guys' moments or phases of life that were like,
Hardship.
yeah, like
3 weeks
real?
before my title fight, I go home and I heard my mom and my wife, hey, your sister has been missing. I said, what? And then we stay like 3 days on the street looking for her, and she's been missing. So, like, for me, it's like, what? And I mean, it's unacceptable. And I mean, someone missing. And I know was something. She went to have lunch, and she never came back. And the thing was strike me on, like, someone knows. Someone saw, someone, not just one. No one get missing in center of Rio de Janeiro. So I find strength to fight, but I went through a big depression after. So, in psychology, I don't know how they call that, but I found strength to fight and become a champion. But when I come that, I didn't respect the time that I need to myself until I combat that. So, and until I forgive, let me live my life, because I'm trying to.
So you held it all together, like.
So I went to
you
depression.
You used all of it to fight, and then you were champion.
And then I became a champion.
And then it just fell apart.
Just fell apart. But then I went to a deep hole.
Yeah.
And then I came back. I want revenge. I want payback. And then I discovered if I don't forgive, I cannot love anymore. And I was not loving my wife, not loving my kids. So it's like I was just angry. And I mean, that's not a good way of living. So you have to, it's almost like you have to rebirth. And of course, never kill someone. But I mean, I hurt a lot of people before. Feelings, promising. So, and then I went through a process of calling everyone I could to ask forgiveness. So I remember I called my cousin and said, hey, I'm calling you because I lied that day. I told you that I didn't have time to have dinner with you. I was busy. I just didn't want to go. So I started being honest with people. Yeah,
This is like a 12-step program.
yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, a lot of people, and I started remember people that I didn't have contact. I do in my mind. Now I want you to forgive the people that hurt you. So you ask forgiveness. Now you have to do the opposite. And I was going through it. In the end, it was the best thing I did in my life. Because honoring a contract without seeing requires faith. That was the hardest thing in my life.
So powerful.
Yeah.
My story starts 2 months after I signed my first pro contract. I, quote unquote, made it. I was ready. I was on fire. And I showed up to a bigger event, which is a singular jump. We're performing a big trick over 50, 60 feet. I was 18 years old, and this big air was constructed. It's often on the ski mountain, but this was constructed on scaffolding in the San Francisco Giant Stadium. About 10 floors of scaffolding, so huge. And we trained in the morning, competed in the afternoon, went for my trick, 540, executed it well, landed backwards. So 540 is 1.5 rotations. Landed backwards, maybe about 530, so a tiny bit off. Before I knew it, I found myself slipping and sliding on stairs. They were 2x4s nailed in along the landing for the crew to walk up and down. And because it was in the heart of the San Francisco Giant Stadium, the sun was beaming and the snow had melted and exposed these stairs. So I found myself going backwards at I don't know what speed, just mobbing down these stairs. And I'm frantically trying to grab onto anything I can to stop my momentum. But I'm just gaining speed. And then all of a sudden, inevitably, I caught an edge and bam, just hit like a ton of bricks. And I didn't lose consciousness. And I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to break all of your ribs. Of course, the wind was knocked out of me and people rushed towards me. And within seconds, I started coughing blood. So that's when they knew it was really serious. Rushed to the hospital, emergency surgery, wake up 2 days later, heavily sedated, feeding tube, machines beeping all around me. Doctors came to see me and informed me that I had basically hit so hard, I sliced my pancreas right in half over my spine.
Oh my gosh.
Clean break. I'd also lacerated my kidneys, bruised my lungs, but the pancreas was the big deal. And doctors straight up told me, we have never seen something like this before. We don't know how you're going to heal. We don't know if you'll be diabetic because your pancreas is a major digestive organ and plays a big part in your insulin. 18. First event on the scene. First event after signing my first pro contract when I'd made it.
Ooh.
We don't know if you're going to become diabetic. We don't know if you're going to maybe develop pancreatitis in your future. You might be very sick. We just don't know.
And this is how it started.
This is how it started.
Crazy.
You might be able to ski, but you're probably not going to compete. You won't be able to take these kinds of impacts because you now have half a pancreas because they weren't able to fix it. So obviously what are you talking about? I just started. This is just the beginning for me. Obviously I'm shattered. I'm feeling all sorts of emotions, anger. But I don't know. I had this nugget inside of me that was like, if there's any fucking chance, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna do it. So flew home and was sick as a dog, really nauseous, lost about 30 pounds. On top of that, I have an incision about 6 inches tall on my stomach and about an inch deep, and it got infected. So they had to they opened it and let it heal from the inside out. So
my.
second intention healing.
That's what it's called?
Yeah, healing by second intention. So they have to open it so the infection doesn't continue to go inwards.
Wow.
So for 3 months, I had to go every day to the clinic to get it packed and cleaned, packed, so on and so forth.
Oh.
So every day was a struggle. Obviously, I went through major depression at first. But I don't know, I'm stubborn. And I didn't want to take no for an answer. And so it was day to day. I had to narrow the focus, and I didn't know. Obviously, I wasn't sure if I could get back, but I knew that if there was a shot that I would. And so I did a lot of visualization. I would
healing imagery?
No.
Or performance
just
imagery?
Performance. But not necessarily to get better, but it's because that's what I dreamed of. That's what I longed to do. So if I couldn't be out there, I would lie in bed and I would kill to be out there.
Wow.
And I slowly got stronger. I slowly was able to sit up straight, walk straight. And 9 months later, got on the hill in New Zealand, almost made my debut back, blew my knee out. So my first 2 years on the scene.
So boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, boom. I've taken a lot of hits early on. Blew my knee out. That's a little cherry on top. So the second time I went back to my doctor now. Okay, you're not going to ski. Like, you're not going to recover from this. But this is a general doctor. And by now it's like, I know my will is so much stronger than this. But it taught me that I can overcome the impossible or almost the impossible. There was everyone outside of me doubted it, and I did it, and I went through that knee injury. So it's 2 years off. My first 2 years on the pro scene were off, and then I came back.
This is adversity for real.
This is
what goes. I think what you just mentioned. This is crazy.
Yeah.
The simulation, what they do to adversity and adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like, you only know how strong you are once you go through it. If it's all easy, when you hit that block, I've seen a lot of athletes not come back from a knee injury because they just don't believe it. It's mental.
The injury goes here. Your injury never came here.
It dabbled. I doubted, but I know, because my belief, my vision was stronger, and then I went on to, I hold the record for most X Games gold medals in women's free ski history, so I did all right.
Very all right.
Did all right.
I mean, the thing I wonder, we all have these kind of similar stories, and we came back from them, right? But that doesn't happen to everybody, and I really wonder, is that our nature? Is it nature that let that happen? Are we different, or is there like something? Yeah, like what is that? How do we get to the bottom? Like, how do we make this useful to other people?
Yeah. It's a mistake you did it, and somebody who's really struggling is less than in some kind of way. We don't really know. There's a genetic component, there's a biology, there's an environmental, there's a cultural, there's a psychological, there's access to good medicine, there's lots of things that go into the mix.
It's a combination of things, no?
Yeah, there are some best practices that are pretty well understood when people are going through a traumatic experience. But it's not for everybody. Not everybody has access to those. This is why, you didn't go and work with a psychologist based on your trauma, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about the strong person. It's something that I did. I had to go I needed help, and so but there's something about the way that you've navigated internally that there's an unlock. There's something there to better understand.
Yeah, is it about preparation ahead of time? Is it about like
That was your answer.
Yeah, for me it
Yeah.
was, but yeah, so I felt like the trauma I went through was like the right dose. You know, it was proper, but if it would have been too much,
That's a
maybe
cool
I
thought.
would have never come back to it.
So
And come back from it.
In my
Yeah.
case, I had people around me, like my spiritual father challenged me and they say, stop. Someone just say, stop.
Yeah.
You this thing can endure for the rest of your life and you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
And faith was a huge part of it, obviously.
And I'm a
Get a-
big
get a
believer
structure.
because faith without action is not faith.
Yeah.
And that's what people realize. Like faith is not like I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna give God 1 week. If he doesn't do it, I'm gonna give him no. I'm gonna believe it until, even if he's not coming back, it's solved. For me, case of my sister is solved. I can live my life, and now I understand whoever did, they don't owe me anything. They don't owe me anything. And that gives me strength and give them great condemnation, because I believe everything you plant, you reap, good or bad.
We are gardeners.
Yeah, we are not.
We are gardeners. Yeah.
And the other thing I think is really, really important is having the support structure, the community around you. So like you need to love those people around you so much,
Oh, yeah.
because at some point you're gonna need that back.
It takes a
That's
village.
huge, yeah.
No one does it alone.
No one does it alone.
Yeah.
100% on that. There's some fundamental commitments that all of us made, and then we stuck with those over time. And I love your dosing. It didn't feel like it was too much. That's a really cool takeaway from it. So before we go, I want to give you a sneak peek at next week's episode, because it's one you definitely want to tune into. I'll be sitting down with the inimitable president of Microsoft Americas, Deb Cupp. We're diving deep into the power of purpose, both in leadership and in life, and how emotional connection drives success. That's Wednesday, February 19th. Make sure you subscribe, and while you're at it, tell a friend. It means so much to us.